Well, it's my pleasure and privilege to introduce today's speaker, Mtre Nancy Cleman, a graduate of McGill Law School, and she's partnered with the Lapointe Rosenstein Marchand Melançon. She is a member of Barreau du Québec and the Law Society of Ontario. And for her professional work, she has recently been named Advocate Emerita of the Barreau du Québec. Well, in addition to her professional activities, she's very active in the community, sitting on several boards and committees such as Société and others. Nancy has been interested in what we now call digital age since 2008, seeing that this new way of living really affects many of our facets of life. And as a way of introduction, let me say that just the day when I invited Nancy to give this lecture, I got a phone call from the son of one of a very distinguished McGill professor who just passed away. And the son said, "You are very close to my dad. Perhaps you have his password to his computer and his email." Of course, I didn't have. Well, so Nancy is going to tell us something about managing your digital assets yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Nancy, all yours.
Thank you very much. I'm going to try and share my screen. Great. Okay, good. Well, thank you so much to Jeanette and Auntie and Leon for inviting me to give this talk. As Auntie said, it's something that's very near and dear to my heart. I became interested in 2008 when a young man died suddenly on Machu Picchu. And I noticed people were trafficking on his Facebook page because that's how he ran his business. And his parents had no idea about how to manage Facebook and how to give access. And then a few years later, a friend of mine passed away, and I was getting reminders for her birthday and invitations on LinkedIn. And again, a very private person was public on the internet. Right. So here's my quote. If I am not able to govern events, I have to govern myself. With the advent of COVID, with the advent of saving trees, going paperless, which I'll never be, everyone says the cloud, the digital, it's gone. And although we seem to have offices with no data, we have tons of data all over the place. In fact, we probably don't even know where we're putting our data as it goes. This was a quote from PW. This is quite an old quote. I think it dates back to, whoops, let me go back. This goes back like 2014. People have no clue where their data is. They don't know how many emails they have, where they're storing their music. They can't find their digital assets. They've lost their photos. They forgot to back up a phone. You know, before we had all these physical possessions. We had photo albums, we had records, we had books. You can look at Auntie's office. That's kind of the reality of how, you know, we love our books. Now everything is on the phone. So everything is kept on a phone, and the phone has more information on it than everything in my office. And I think that's the thing we forget about. Just because we hold the phone, we don't have access to the data. The olden days, that's the old normal. So now we live in a digital age. We have social media, and we know, especially with COVID, we're speaking on Instagram and Facebook. We have WeChat accounts. We have all types of ways to communicate, but we're all using other people's data networks. We have domain names, emails, photos. I think I have 3,000 photos on my phone. When's the last time you printed a photo from your phone? People have recipe accounts for the New York Times. They don't have cookbooks. Are you still printing your recipes? And we have personal information, paper, computer, phone, both. The agenda's on your phone. The address book is on your phone. When you buy a new phone, you're transferring all your data. So basically your life is online. And it goes, now we have vaccine passports, we have medical records. In Quebec, you know, we have electronic medical records, we have banking statements, online banking, save a dollar, don't get any more printed bills, accounting records, even online with Revenue Canada. And I'm not going to talk about cyber attack today, I'll talk a bit about privacy. But if you decide to realize how much information you store online, I think you'll be surprised. We have businesses run online, also through Facebook and other social media. And now we have digital currency and Bitcoin. So here's the story, that if we don't take charge of what happens on our death, or if we're incapacitated or disabled, we leave a digital footprint that was unintended. And on the one hand, it's kind of like you leave your house open and everyone can go take whatever they want. And on the other hand, you get locked out of your life. I myself, a few years ago, one of my close friends passed away and I was her liquidator. And I was afraid of asking for her password for her phone. But I said to myself, I'm sorry, she is at the last days of her life and I don't have the password. I won't be able to do my job as a liquidator. And now actually I do have long conversations with friends and with clients to say, well, what do you want? First of all, what do you have? And second of all, what do you want done? Do you want your Facebook account up? Should we close down your LinkedIn? What belongs to you? What belongs to your business? And these are questions and difficult conversations we need to have. As we move online to some of the more important assets are online, some of our business assets are online, and some of our legacy, being it a domain name or if we own other types of IP, may have be one of the most valuable assets in your portfolio. So that was the paper calendar, which some people still run a paper and a other one. But we no longer go with our key to the safety deposit box and pull out the important papers. We don't look into a file folder with a list of our bank account and insurance policies. Just so you know, the province of Quebec is investing millions of dollars for a digital ID, and we'll have them across Canada, where we will now have, in addition to our social insurance number, a digital ID number that will access our driver's license, our Medicare card, and there are other programs across Canada and BC and Ontario that are discussing the same thing, because digital is the reality. And in the past, you know, I remember I had my address book and I would white out and change the name and update everything and transfer it every year. Now, because of the ease of having everything online, we forget about that. We may not have access to it. We just open our phone, we plug, we recharge. If we lose our password, we ask for a new password. So I think we really need to take an account of what's today. Our phones are our address books, our calendars, our cameras. We do mobile banking, we do Facebook, we play games, we use communication tools. And then we say, okay, well, it's very nice that you have access. But this year alone, I had 3 clients who had children who passed away, and they had no idea how to get into the phone. And the most important thing they needed was the telephone. So some had fingerprints, but they also should have numeric access codes, and they couldn't. And legally, you can't get it. It's not very easy. I'll talk about this as we go along, but in one case, the parents wanted to know, like, what happened? I want to read the emails. They didn't have any information about the email. In another case, a client's son had purchased something on Kijiji and paid for it, but then he suddenly died of a heart attack and they wanted to pick up the item he died. So we did some research, we spoke to Kijiji and they said, I'm sorry, due to privacy rights, we cannot give you the information. But out of compassion, Kijiji allowed us to write a letter to the person who had sold the goods to see that they would pass it on. But otherwise we were supposed to go to court to get court access. You know, you can't go to court quickly and it's expensive and it made no sense. The other thing, again, is now we have 2-factor identification. So you need to keep the cell phone, because oftentimes to get access to your email or Office 365, you need a code, a 4-digit code from the phone. So when you're dealing with someone's incapacity, or you're their representative or your liquidator, you need their phone, or you need to update the phone information, or you won't have access to the same information. Similarly, we talk about all the stuff and all the emails we leave on our PCs. Well, let's take the email part aside. Let's talk about all the Word documents that you're leaving there. I had a client who had private journals on her computer. And she said, I don't want my children to ever see this. I said, okay, what's the solution? I said, well, you can print out your private papers, or you can delete stuff, because if you're not there and people can look into your computer and have access, they'll read everything that's there. And similarly, if you keep all your accounts online for your accountant and all your paperwork and your bank statements, we need to get organized, and we need to keep things, because there's valuable information that we take for granted that we'll have access to, but it's not sitting in paper records. It's sitting on our computer. So if you don't print, then you need to store the information. You need to ensure that you and those you represent have access to it. Of course, I always still print important documents because I want to have a file. And everyone says, oh, I'll pay $1 for cloud storage. We're not going to talk today about the rights of the storage keepers and where your data is going, but down to practical terms, you're going to need access to the information, and you have to at least understand where your information is and how you keep it. So what's my solution? Prepare a memorandum of digital assets and do a digital assets audit. What email accounts do you have? On what devices? Passwords? Do you have backup email accounts? For example, do I use my Videotron if I lose my password on my Hotmail? What about my security questions? How do I access various different tablets, hardware, computers, smartphones? By the same account, do not just give away an asset when it's old. Make sure it's scrubbed and all your data is off it. Bring it to someone who's a professional and make sure you remove all your footprint, you know, your old letters, your emails. You don't want someone to hack or try and get identity theft from that. Social media. How many social media accounts do you have, and how many are you looking at? Cancel the automatic renewals of your subscriptions on iTunes. You may have things that are set up for automatic renewal. And, you know, apparently due to COVID and life, our attention span has shrunk. So we forget what we have. It's kind of like we have cupboards and cupboards that are full of stuff. We don't ever look at it. We just look at the most recent page. You might have 4 pages of apps on your phone. Do you really look at them? Do you really need them? Have you signed up for services because you went on a trip 2 years ago and they keep on sending you new promotions? These are all the types of things you need to consider. So who is the guardian of our privacy if we can't speak? And how can we be sure our legacy is protected? If we don't take care, we're leaving all this information all over the place, but we're also at risk of losing important information. So here's my question. There's all the dishes. Well, I consider data and dishes to be the same. Take, you know, the way we have a smoke detector policy, or it's your birthday, or it's spring cleaning. Why don't you take a minute to go through everything you keep digital? Am I using all the applications? Unsubscribe. You must in Canada, because of council, we have unsubscribe at the bottom of every email. If you don't need the information, you can unsubscribe. If you want to join again, you can. Shut down old email accounts. And also delete old messages that you don't need. Do you really need to keep 3,000 old messages? You may want to print some because they're nice notes from your children or your family. You know, the sad part about the digital age is I have letters from my father, from my grandmother, from friends. I don't get letters anymore. I have like emails. So maybe print them, but you don't need to keep everything. And it also can be a problem if you keep information that's unnecessary. People say mean things in text and they say mean things in email, and it's not fun for them to read it. And there are unintended consequences. Again, last week I had a call from someone who's all upset because someone added a nasty comment and they forwarded in an email. They weren't aware they were doing it. They just sent it on. They thought that they had sent a clean email. So they're hurt feelings that are unnecessary. So once you've done your big inventory and you make your decision, okay, what do I need to keep, what I don't want to keep, how am I going to be organized? And then find out, what can I do about it? Because everything has a cost. You don't get it for free. Gold, data is the gold. And you know, when all these sites are giving you email accounts and they're giving you social media accounts, they're collecting your data. Now you'll see it's much more sophisticated. You have a bit more control on how you share your data, but find out what you can be done. And that's always on the part you never read. It's the terms and conditions or the privacy policy in the website. And you need to designate and have conversations with people in your family or your liquidators, executors to say, hey, what do you want? You want your Facebook account to survive after you die? You want to shut it down? You know, do you want to transfer your iTunes account? You have hundreds of books and hundreds of music. What can I do about that? You have loyalty points. These are all different aspects of your inventory. The other thing, in addition to any memorandum or letter, is who should have access to information and what should happen. Because if you don't, it's going to be your liquidator's decision or your mandatary's decision as to what's going to happen with your things. And you know, if you're a private person, you may not want your Facebook written flying around. You may not want it memorialized. You may want it deleted. You may you have to start thinking about, you may not care, you know. It's just a decision that you need to choose. So the other challenge for us is most of our social media sites are located in the United States. And although the policies are constantly being updated and the law is in a state of flux, a lot of times it's someone in California. If you're not organized, it's going to say yes or they're going to say no. To delete, they'll say yes. To give you a password, they'll say no. Maybe they'll give you information, but normally people don't have the time or the energy or the money to deal with this. And so there's a lot of valuable information that they don't have access to and they haven't planned for it. But even regularly, I find like Gmail and Microsoft, they're always updating their terms to try and address the issue. And there's also legislation in the United States and there's legislation tabled in Canada. So they're going to try and provide legal rights to individuals to have access. But because we're so driven by privacy these days, privacy tends to win. To the point there have been cases, you know, even in Quebec, where parents have wanted access to their child's Facebook page and they won't get it. Now the courts are allowing it because of some sad circumstances. But really, we're privacy driven as opposed to personal driven. And because these are third-party companies, they tend to worry more about protecting people and not giving out information. Another thing I've noticed is a lot of people don't totally understand how their phones work and how their computers work and how, you know, if you log into Facebook, then you want to log into a website. They say, oh, do you want to log in via Facebook or do you want to log in via email? So all of a sudden, and you can check this actually if you go to Facebook on your settings, you may have logged into 10 other sites via Facebook. So you probably may not know what you're logging into, not because you didn't intend to, you just may not be aware because it's kind of easy for the technology people to do it and more difficult for you to know. So again, once I think, you know, on your phone and on your social media accounts, go to the bottom of the page or go into the phone account and check privacy settings and decide what you want, what you don't want. You know, sometimes, and I think you've seen if you have an Apple phone, They're asking you, do you want to have geolocation services? Do you want to have access while you're using the app? Or they're going to ask you, do you want to share your data so I can sell you shoes, or I'm going to get ads that are more appropriate? Because if you don't pay for the service, they need to buy ads to give you the service. So, and they do that by sharing your data. So that's really, as I said, they're sharing data and you're sharing your own data. You may not care. Like I find we have debates in the office. Younger people don't care. If I can get shoes for $100 less, why not? On the other hand, we're more afraid now of cybersecurity and cyber fraud and hacking and identity theft. So we're trying to find a happy medium. I also found out that some people share an email account, which I don't agree with. I mean, I think you may find it nice to have a family account, but then there's complications if you're using your spouse's email account and someone passes away, you might lose your email account. So the same way you can have joint accounts, you also should probably have your own individual bank account or your individual data account so you can control what's going on. I think right now people realize that, as I said, you know, we're going to have to deal with access to accounts and death and disability. Other policies we're looking on now is as we go more electronic, but just take it as a rule that you should be prepared and organized, especially with banks as well. A lot of people are doing banking online. So we need to figure out how to keep the data in a safe space or a password place in a safe space so the people that are representing you will be able to access it. So as I said, there's no clear legislation right now that gives executors or mandatories access to digital accounts. Sorry about the typo. What we have done is we've put special language into your wills and into your mandates and into your power of attorneys. So when you go to speak to your advisors, make sure that you actually have a digital rights clause in your will and in your power of attorney. Because at the very least, if something happens and you say, well, no, I'm the liquidator, I'm the mandatory, you can show them the document and you can say, I'm authorized by the individual to have access to these accounts. And with this, the bank will give you access to the account, or may, and also probably Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram will also probably give you access. Now I thought I'd go through a couple of sites just to show you what's happening. So Facebook, they came up with two options. You can delete the account or you can memorialize it. Memorialized account is something that's frozen in time. So you can't add, you can't change what's on it, but it prevents other people logging in. So when Peter, this fellow that passed away, his account has been not even memorialized. It was actually taken over by someone, and the account that he used called On the Globe is now being used by all kinds of other people. I don't know if he'd be happy or if he'd be sad, but it's been sort of hijacked by other people. But you see, you'll see that Facebook says we don't provide login information for someone else's account. It's against their policy to log into another person's account. But what they will do is, if you're a legacy contact, and this is now, Facebook does provide for legacy contacts, you can do certain acts. Now it's a choice, but in some cases, like with Google and Facebook, you can actually name individuals to have rights on your account. So for example, you could respond to a new friend request. You can update the profile, the cover photo. You can write a certain post about the person who's passed away. Frankly, I find out that a lot of people, they don't want to deal with it. So the Facebook accounts are still around many years after the person has passed away, because it's too difficult for people to deal with. They feel sad, you know, to leave it. So, you know, you can read messages. If you're not a legacy contact, you can submit a request. So you don't have as much power as you can remove friends. So really, if you feel Facebook's important to you, consider who should be your legacy contact. Now, of course, they've updated their message that it's going to take even longer because of COVID, because everyone's working from home and short-staffed. LinkedIn's a very interesting thing because LinkedIn is often a business account for people. And this is something I think people have to deal with, especially if you're dealing with people's accounts, because you don't want someone to hack in or to try and take an identity theft. But you may also want to shut down a LinkedIn account. When you're acting for people that have small businesses, their LinkedIn account may be their big source of business. They might have 500, 600 active people on their account. So you may want to consider, what do I do with this asset? So is it something that, how you're going to deal with it? You know, if you're not authorized to act, then you can report them as having died and they'll hide the account. And that's something which is an option. If you have authority to act on behalf of the deceased person, you can memorialize or close the account. And again, having that information in a will or a power of attorney will give you authority, most generally. I just wanted to show you how much information you need. You need the name, the profile, who are you, the email address, the date they died. You even need to send an obituary. And I just was showing you like examples of information. You don't have to read all the slide now, but they have different rules, by the way. In Europe, where the rules are different, sometimes the rules to access accounts are different. But it's almost like another form of probate: letters of administration, representation, court orders. This is heavy duty stuff. Google, a lot of people use Gmail, and I wrote an article for the bar several years ago because a lot of people, when they set up their business, they use their Gmail account. Well, you can have an inactive account manager, and I think if Gmail is your key email address, you probably may want to consider one so that you actually have a backup. Because for a lot of people, if everything is on Gmail, all their correspondence, their discussions with their accountants, then you want to have a real plan for this, because you need to have a plan for your account. Because if you get locked out, like if you're a lawyer and you're practicing on Gmail and you get locked out, there's a lot of professional liability for you there because you don't have access to your correspondence with your clients. I was dealing with another matter the last few weeks ago, and I know that the executor had asked me for a copy of my file, which by the bar I'm not allowed to give. But I said he doesn't have access to the email accounts. Because if he had access to the email accounts, because we communicate by email, he would have had every letter I had written to the deceased. So it's just proof to me that he didn't have access to the email, he didn't have access to text or whatever communications we were having, and he's not going to get it because the wills were probably drafted 5 and 10 years ago. They didn't foresee digital clauses, and that's just going to be lost. Google will not provide passwords or login information. We did have a case one time, I think for iCloud, we were able to get login information with a more complicated process. But if you're alive, it's different. If you're dead, it's very different. So again, Gmail's message, you know, we're aware, but it's all about privacy. And they may provide some content in a certain case, but they need an authorized representative of the deceased person. And they're always going to vote privacy over access, and they're going to make the decision because they don't want to be sued. But you know, that's why we need a plan. You know, so they talk about your photos, your emails, because you know, Google like has everything in it, right? If you have Google, you have Google Docs, you have your email address, you might have your photos. They want to own you. They want to be your conservatory, your laboratory. They want everything. So that's why for some people, the inactive account manager might be a good option, because you're not only talking about email, you're talking about other things that you store in Google. Now, hot news from Apple, it's not in place yet. When iOS 15 came out, Apple has announced they're going to create the legacy contact. They realize it's important. And again, a lot of us are dependent. We're using either Android or Apple, I would say in most parts of the world. So they said, you know, I need to come up with an opportunity here. What they announced this year is that they're going to choose someone that you can choose to trust to become an account recovery contact to reset your password. And they will be introducing a digital legacy program. You know, I think they realize it's part of their responsibility that people are going to have access to the contacts and the phones and the information. So that's coming later this year, and we're going to watch it. But I think as of now, you can put in account recovery contacts. Microsoft, again, Microsoft has a totally different approach. Microsoft has the 2-year approach. So after 2 years, it's automatically closed. And if you don't know, it's just gonna be closed. So I think it's kind of interesting, at least you know if you're on an Outlook kind of program with Microsoft services, after 2 years, it's gone. They have, I put some links in my presentation. All the steps you need to close the account. You can reopen it within 60 days. They'll hold on to your data for that period, then they permanently delete. So again, I don't think most people know this. They just think, okay, it's there, it's always going to be there. No, it's not always going to be there. I would click on the link, but I'm afraid I won't get back to my presentation, so I won't. I'll try it later. You want to ensure that subscriptions are canceled. You can stop subscriptions by closing the bank account or credit card, revoke authorizations. Outlook.com and OneDrive accounts are frozen after a year, and any email will be deleted shortly after. So again, we never do, but if you were going to go read the Microsoft Services Agreement, you've found there's a lot of valuable information, at least you'll know. And for some of you, you'll say, okay, I don't have to worry, it's all going to be gone. Keep my life simple. I'm going to print the information I need, and eventually it's going to disappear. Now, just to show you how complicated life is, that if you have to go legal, they have to be served with a valid subpoena or court order to comply. But, you know, this is thousands of dollars, and you need to find a lawyer, and it's not obvious. So, and they're only going to respond to non-criminal subpoenas served on your registered agent in the state or region. No fax, no email. So they're not waiting to help you out. They'll send you a condolence note. They'll feel sad. It's really sad, but you're not organized. De facto, it's pretty well lost. So any decision to provide the contents of an email or cloud storage will be made only after careful review and consideration, and they may be unable to provide the content. And just because you send a request or you provide a subpoena or a court order does not guarantee. And I can tell you, in part of my issues of dealing with the estate, domain name, going to deal with I had to spend reams and reams of documents and affidavits, and they would give me access to something and not something else. I just gave up. I just figured out what to do it. But I mean, I'm a lawyer, and I do this as a regular basis in my practice. And I had to renew a domain name because I was dealing with a professional estate. It was impossible. The information they wanted, and the details, and the date, and the time to fill out the forms, and it was all governed by US law. Not simple. So just remember, different terms of use, check them, read them, or get someone to read them for you. So the bottom line is you've got to update all your information. If you're running a small business on the side, keep track of everything that goes on. I mean, I've really spent more time talking about individuals in their day-to-day life, but some people buy domain names. And it's important. I've had many cases where people, they go on a website, they pay a fee, they get a special email address, but they've given up the rights to control it to their child or their friend or some random person that knows computers. It's really not a good idea. Make sure you always control access to what you need. If you subcontract to someone else, it's fine, but I can't tell you how many times the digital person that came in to help the person got into a fight, and then they said, well, I'm closing access to your account. Really hard to get it back and really expensive. You know, I don't know how to use Facebook. Then don't go on Facebook, or make sure it's someone that you trust. They shut down the Facebook account. They had to buy another domain name because, you know, these are personal relationships, but it's about you, the person. That's why I'm saying there's no free lunch, there's no free anything. There's always a hidden cost, and your data is the cost. And I think if you do it, it's fine. But just know you're doing it and you don't care. Like sometimes I don't really care. I know I will never be able to shut down everything, but I'm constantly now unsubscribing, closing things down, trying to sort of lose digital weight, you know, make it skinnier, because at least a bit at a time, it's better. But really make sure that you speak to your attorney and counsel and get all the information added and have a strategy. Some people, they go online. I mean, I know I have a lot of my passwords on Apple. I have a lot of things in a secret book that my sister knows about. And I said, this is the notebook that has everything in, because they're saying, well, if you tell someone your password, I'm going to take you out of this. You have to have a practical solution. You have online banking, you know, same thing, right? You've got to have access to the bank account. You get frozen out of the bank account, the bills go unpaid. Because when a crisis happens or someone becomes sick, we need to prepare in the good times. We can't wait to prepare when the crisis is happening. I don't need to repair that, but I want to remind you that your tax information, we've had a case where they gave the laptop away and all the tax information was on it. So, you know, when you're willing things, make sure that everything is cleaned up and in good order before you give it away. I think I'm just going to spend a few more minutes, not repeat myself, but I'll just give you some examples. So we had a shareholder dispute over an Instagram account. We had cases where people got named personally in lawsuits because they owned a social media account, so they got dragged into a lawsuit. We had cases where the person who had the control over a domain name was fired from their job. So the people would go in and change access to domain name, and then the fired employee would change it again. So they were playing tennis until they figured out that the person controlled the domain name and the email things actually were no longer on good terms with the business. Takedown notices on GoDaddy and lawsuits. I mean, there's a lot of things that we can do now. We had a case this year where someone had taken a photo of an individual and they put it up on a false site for fundraising. Because they, you know, was a well-known person. So we had to go and hire lawyers to go under the Digital Millennium Act of the United States to take down the lawsuit. Even there's a famous case pre all this with Kafka where he, and the dispute is even to this day, he wanted everything destroyed and they were not destroyed. And there's still litigation cases going now on his diaries. I think what I found really heartbreaking is in these cases of these young people and older people that died suddenly, they wanted to know what happened, or they needed access to an information, or they wanted to contact people and they couldn't. On the other hand, with someone else I knew recently, we actually sat down because she knew she was at the end of her life and we closed everything down. It made it so much easier for her liquidators. Oh, she says, I don't need this account and I don't need my old AOL account. And she cleaned everything up so that when her liquidators were dealing with her estate, it was much simpler because everyone knew what the plan was. She says, no, I don't want to be on Facebook. Get rid of this, get rid of that. But it was a difficult discussion, but a very worthy discussion. So, you know, the whole point is take some time to plan and you'll have peace of mind and you'll enjoy the fruits and all the fun of having things online and iTunes and Spotify and all these services we have and all these online journals. I was thinking, I think you can give your iTunes account to one person. But sometimes, you know, you say, well, I paid thousands of dollars for these ebooks. Who can I give them to? What do I do? Do I give my tablet to someone? Do I give them access? You know, we don't think about it because it's just there. But it takes a human to operate and a human to know how to operate. It's like having a whole bunch of cars that have no keys. So since I'm a lawyer, of course, I say that this is a general overview. This is not legal advice. And I encourage you all to reach out to a professional if you need assistance. So that's the formal part, Nancy.
Thank you so much, Nancy. This was a really revelation for many people. And I think it's so comprehensive that they could start right away sorting out their lives. Let me ask you one question, because I got a question about making your slides available. This is a recorded session, and would you also agree that we provide PDF of your slides?
Yeah, no, I will. I'm going to send them to you, and you can distribute them to those that want them, yeah.
Excellent. So are you ready for question and answer period, or you need some rest?
No, let's keep going. It's good.
Okay, very good. So I have here one question. Need to mention personal photos. People could think about what happens with their automatic renewal stops for the photo storage. Those photos could be lost forever. Please ensure that they have backed up those photos elsewhere. This is actually advice to everybody. It's not quite a question.
No, right. But I think it's a very important point. I mean, that's one of the saddest things, and you don't have to be ill or dead. You can just lose them because you didn't do a proper backup. And I can tell you, or your phone stolen. And I can tell you again, we've had many cases where people, their phone was stolen and they lost the videos of their kids or their family or deceased friends. So you really need a backup for your photos. And I tell people, for the important photos, print them. It's not a terrible thing. I think that's really extremely good advice. Also, again, print important emails and back up your phone, because there's a lot of cyber hacking going on these days. And I can tell you, even the Quebec government itself, you know, last year, I think one of the faculties, or that they sent notices to people in the Department of Education, because they were hacked and the data was hacked, and they'll pay for credit monitoring. I think I'm just reading some of the questions with you, Auntie, but I would say,
okay.
So all the various, their programs for Aeroplan, Pharmaprix, again, go on the terms of service for each and every loyalty card, and they will tell you what happens. I think you can transfer some points, you can. Sometimes it costs you money, but every program has its own recipe.
I would like to add something from personal experience, and that is Google catches everything that's published online. And I had a situation that the system, which listed members of one of the societies that I'm associated with, and in really 5 minutes, all these names became they were stored by Google. Well, we closed the site, but when you search, you could find a name, and it just happened that this was also personal data. And that person was very upset, even wanted to sue us, to take out some of this archive data from Google, which is accessible by search, but not necessarily immediately visible. It took 4 different communications with Google. So if you have something like that, be careful. All right, let's go on.
But to your point, Auntie, also now you hear a lot about the right to be forgotten, and that's very strong in Europe. And we are having big changes coming in Quebec and in the rest of Canada on our privacy. And there's cases involving Google in Canada. And I can tell you that it's going to be important that you're going to be able to delete. And technologically, I don't know how it's going to be managed, but it's a very, very important topic, because even again, I know I get emails from cousins of mine that have passed away because no one shut down the accounts. So I'm getting emails. And that's the other thing, right? What are we most worried about? Phishing emails, cyber. So you get an email from someone, you know, you click on it, but it's not that person, it's to steal your data. So you really, I tell everyone, when you get a strange email, think or press on the email to see who is the actual name behind the name, because there's some identity theft if we don't shut these things down properly.
Speaking of that, I mentioned that famous professor that passed away recently. Well, his technician died 15 years ago. I still get reminders from his Facebook about his birthdays, although he's been away for 15 years. And I'm not quite sure what anybody can do, but that's part of the history. Okay, if we could continue, that's Helen. Is it possible to set up automatic email forwarding to a partner, family member of if one is facing disability or death?
I think you can set it up as an interim measure, sure. You know, you can start it, but at some point, for example, it's good to have a plan. So that's one way of continuing. One thing that happened also, which I found was just awful, is someone was managing an email account of someone who passed away, and they sent us emails that the person had passed away from their email account. And I thought, seriously, you know, that individual is not with us. And it was really creepy to get an email saying, you know, the funeral is on such and such a time. So, yeah, that happened.
From Wayne, can one designate the beneficiary for airplane or other reward programs?
So as I said, yeah, Aeroplan does have a plan, and so do all the other Air Mile loyalty cards. You have to go into that program. I don't want to answer it specifically because they're being constantly updated, but they all have a section on the site that can tell you what to do.
All right. Well, Lorraine has a question. As a retiree from McGill, I still haven't used my McGill email account. What happens to it on my passing?
So Auntie, you can answer that because I have no idea.
I could only say that Human Resources has about 4 months delay from anything happens, either when you need something because it changed or something like that. It's changing. We have a new software called Workday, which seems to be getting better and better as people know how to do it. Okay, Anonymous, what is good method for recording and storing one's password securely?
So, yeah, well, you can do it. I mean, there are a number of programs. I think you can do some research. I don't want to make any specific recommendation, but there are some programs that exist. I'm of two minds about that. I tend to have like the notepad where I white out and I print it in, and I have a bunch of things that are on my iPhone under that password lock. It's always changing. So some people prefer to go with a password manager. I always get nervous because I said, well, what if the company goes out of business or they go bankrupt? But that's my own concern as a lawyer. But I would say I would investigate either keeping it in an email account or keeping it in a notebook. And you realize now that we tend to have so many passwords and change them all the time that some people like to have an account where they have one key main password and they just change a few items.
That's actually unadvisable to have the same password in many places, because when it's broken, people with malicious intent could really take over. But one way to do it is that you have staggered storage of your password. In other words, you have one that has password to the next one, and that next one has a separate password, and the likelihood that somebody would break both, it's much less.
And then I think we're going to see more movement on that. And now also you have two-factor identification. So you not only need the password, but you're going to need an either email account or you're going to need a phone. Like in our Office for Office 365, when we change a password, we need a code. So that's why you're going to need a phone and a password. So it's making it harder to hack into.
Right. We just recently had a seminar about this, and it was quite popular. Okay, Nicola, can I print your slides? I want to use them for my to-do list. Well, if you
You're going to get my slides, right?
Okay. Okay, Leon, what about a university website? Do you know if McGill has a policy to keep them open?
You mean like a web page, or what do you mean?
Yeah, that's not quite sure.
Because I think you can, like if you had your own page, I don't know, again, I'm pretty sure if you go into the privacy policy of McGill, they probably have detailed rules about that.
Right.
But I actually didn't go and read it before the talk.
Yeah. Hannah, could I have a copy on your presentations? Yes, you will have it. Chris, we are about to update our will. Any types of these digital matters? Peace of mind for those left behind.
So as I said, I think you should identify your what I call a digital liquidator. It could be someone who's going to either be your actual liquidator, and make sure the notary or lawyer puts in all the clauses. I mean, I have specific clauses drafted to deal with digital assets. And that now includes Bitcoin. If you're dealing with NFTs and you're dealing with Bitcoins and other intangibles, all those need to go into the will. Because, you know, there's new technology being invented almost every week. We didn't talk about NFTs, you know, last year, and now they're millions of dollars. And so there's language that goes in. And I think it's standard in Quebec in the Chamber of Notaries. And I know in our practice, we have updated language for it.
Thank you.
See, that's the thing when you're dealing, here's a big issue. And you've seen all those cases, which I didn't really talk about here, but with the Bitcoin, and if you're using blockchain and you lose the key, you could be up millions of dollars. So if you're trading in Bitcoin, you have a digital key, and that digital key is critical, you know, and I could add it onto the talk, but there were 3 cases where people can't find the key, and one guy, I think it's millions of dollars he's out now. And that's a Bitcoin blockchain security issue. Well,
it becomes more and more complicated with the advances in technology. As much as technology solves, it also makes it more difficult. Okay, next question is Edward. Why does Google arrange your photos and send you notices and even slideshows of your photos with music?
Well, Facebook does the same thing. They think they're helping you. But that's to remind you, Edward, that they're controlling your data, okay? That in fact, you don't own it. You are just getting access to the platform, but they're the ones that are managing your data and your photos and all your information. Your device or your computer is just where you see it, but it's not yours. It's not like the physical photo album that sits in your house or the book that sits on your bookcase.
Yes. Audrey, how safe is to write down your password in iPhone notes?
Well, okay. So, I mean, if you put it in iPhone notes and it's not password protected, it's as safe as, I don't know how you manage it, you know? I mean, I would say that people tend to sometimes write it down there the minute they do it, but then maybe you would want to take it off there and put it in a more secure place, you know, just for the second. But I wouldn't leave it necessarily in your notes all the time. At least I would use the password protector thing, which is more secure.
Particularly, you don't put password to your iPhone on iPhone and then lose it.
Yeah.
Well, that's self-evident, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I think that we have really come to the end of the questions, unless somebody has one additional. And let me then once again thank Nancy for this wonderful, illuminating presentation, which we are particularly grateful that you're going to make it available to all of us. And I really appreciate for your time, we appreciate your expertise and good advices. And we have the work ahead of us to do all this, implement all these good advices. Thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure. Have a good day. All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.